Hello, BookTube. Well, as you can see, I have a guest. How's this for framing? You got the Beans face, you got me, you got Erasmus, and you got my guest, my friend Sam, who's been on this channel so many times.
Many times over the years.
Come to visit, talk about books until the wee small hours. Of course, you're an old father of 15 or 16 children, so the wee small hours is 9:15. I'll do my best.
Early.
I'll do my best to entice you to 10:15 with High School Musical clips.
Only one of us falls asleep in the chair at the end of the night, and it's not Steve.
I'm accustomed to allowing a certain amount of pity here because being 28, I'm accustomed to people around me being old fogies who can't rock it anymore. But we have a special occasion. Ordinarily, when Sam is here, we do a tag because on BookTube we love our tags.
I am confounded by tags every time I come.
But this time it's not. This time you have seen these questions nowhere else, and I have barely glanced at them because they were submitted. They were custom made by Hannah at Hannah's Books. I asked her, I told her, Sam's coming for a visit. Would you like to give us things to talk about? And she did. Now, I copied these things, but I did not look at them. So we'll be encountering these things really. I think the file is called Hannah's Questions. Okay. So let's see what we got here. This question number. Oh my God. Okay.
Hannah, we are in your hands.
Yes, and I am caught between Scylla and Charybdis. If Scylla and Charybdis were not dangerous obstacles in Greek mythology, but rather were both big-brained, wordy people, because the first question is like 9 paragraphs long. She's very much cut from your cloth. They both engage in this deep thinking I've heard so much about. I've largely avoided it myself in my life. Number 1. What do you do with all the advance copies you receive? Steve, you've referred to organizing your shelves of advance copies each month. We haven't done that yet. We still have to do that. But talk us through exactly what you do. And Sam, do you have a similar kind of system in place? What do you do with these editions after you finish with them? Are there legal or ethical issues about giving away advance books that were not intended for general circulation?
Okay.
So the whole question of
the whole
the ecosystem.
life cycle of advance books.
The impression I get from other critics is that nobody is as organized with their advance copies as I am.
Probably not. Although I have to be fairly organized.
You have to be. I would think everybody would be. I mean, do you keep yours month by month?
Yes.
You do?
I do it at the office.
Oh, so you don't have a huge section?
I don't have books sent to my house.
Okay.
That would be
oh my God. You would be buried in them.
It would not be good.
Buried in them.
They are sent to the office, the Wall Street Journal office, and I go once a week, and they in the room, the book room, where all the book packages are sent, there is a shelf that is for fiction, and it gets hastily unboxed and unbagged, and then they just if they notice that it says novel, they put it on that shelf, and then I go and then I organize it by month, and then I will take a tote bag full home, and then I have to the month has passed and there's stuff that I didn't take. They have a big box that I don't know what they do with it, but I think it's recycling.
You were just at the Strand. I forgot to ask you. Do they still have a fugitive little section downstairs where all the advance copies are?
I don't think they do, but I don't know. I didn't look for it, but you could always tell before because there would just be sort of lurkers who would wait at the.
Oh, in the old days, you remember the wall they had? Just a mighty wall of advance copies.
Yes, but I believe it's not. Technically, Hannah asks about the, what you're supposed to do with that stuff.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to sell it? I know you're not allowed to sell it online, except as like a collectible sort of thing. Like on Amazon, you can't sell it, or they'll pull your account. In a bookstore, I don't know. I think the Strand may have stopped doing it. I think we stopped. When I worked at Housing Works bookstore, we also had a wall, but we stopped because we were afraid that the books would get sorted into the stuff that would get put on Amazon, and that Amazon would kill the
that would be dangerous, because you did business on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Housing Works did business.
Oh, yeah, all of the business. As far as what I do, I'm really sorry to say, is I throw them away. I don't know what to do with them. If anyone wants them and wants to come to my apartment and take them, I will be glad to give them to you. But they don't want them at use bookstores. They won't buy them, and I don't think they want them at thrift stores either. I mean, they would take it, but I'm not sure that's useful.
I wonder if are they collectible on eBay? Do you think?
I mean, maybe the few that are actually collectible.
Or maybe the more outre ones, or do publishers do gimmicky stuff anymore? It used to be that they would do elaborate gimmicky ARCs for some things.
Sometimes, yes, some of them are collectible. That's right. If Margaret Atwood or whomever has a new book, then I suppose you will find people.
Or something that, like for instance, Vikram Chandra's book Sacred Games. The advance copy for that was 6 or 7 little pamphlets. The book is enormous. But the advance copy was a box. You got a custom-made box, and inside the box were 6 or 7 little segments that comprised the whole book. You're never going to see that in that format.
I think they've stopped doing that. What publishers discovered during the pandemic, when they stopped for about a year, they stopped putting out bound galleys because nobody was going to the office. They had nowhere to send it. They saved so much money doing that, and then they resumed it. But they resumed it with a certain reluctance, I think, as you've discovered.
Reluctance is a very diplomatic way of putting it out. So they realized what I've said on this channel, which is that suddenly they weren't sending out galley copies or review copies of any kind, and yet books kept getting reviewed.
Yes.
So suddenly the whole industry realized, wait, well, why are we doing this?
Yes. No, I know. And it's the same at the newspaper. Sometimes they'll say, let me know if you want a book. I'm like, just send them all because I need them. But I can't be requesting every single one. But
no. And in addition to let me know if you want the book, there's also a kind of proprietariness. It's okay, I sent this to you, so how far have you got on it? What are you thinking of doing with this? I've had to tell a number of publicists, you send me the book, and that's it. The end. If you see a review, you got a review out of it. If you didn't, you're out the postage. But that's it. No progress reports.
Yeah.
I can't.
We are registering the single most niche complaint ever made on. Why don't publishers send all of their galleys to me without me having to ask for them?
The number of people who can register this niche complaint who don't have any other profession is pretty much what you're looking at right here on the screen. There aren't many. They wouldn't crowd this room. So yeah, I guess it is kind of a niche complaint. But everybody complains about their job.
Yes.
Don't they?
But anyhow, the answer to the question is I get rid of them. I used to have places to take them, and I don't anymore. And the ones that are finished, that are not galleys, I try to bring them to thrift stores.
Yeah, there isn't any injunction about finished copies, right? They're just indistinguishable from the book you
No, they're just regular books.
Okay. All right. And then question number 2 is much shorter. So question number 2 is, what makes you decide to write about particular books? Oh, that's a good question. Do you have a pretty good idea what you will review a book before you read it, or do you only decide afterwards? What convinces you that it is a good choice for a published review? I was about to say that my side of the street, nonfiction, it would be easier to know ahead of time, before you've even read the book, that you are going to write about it. But that's true for your side of the street, too, isn't it?
I mean, sort of. I mean,
what's Roberto Bolaño writing this year? You're going to review it no matter what it is. Or is it that maybe that's not the case? I mean,
I think everyone has slightly different answers to this, and a lot of it is if they... Here's the thing. You have to have something to say about the book. That's really what you're looking for. You're looking for things that you might have something to say about. And the real problem is when you get a book, it's not even necessarily that the book is bad. It's just you have nothing.
The new Ann Tyler. What are you going to do with the new Ann Tyler?
Yeah.
You're not to single her out. To single her out, but you know what I mean. That's the kind of thing. Exactly right. You've got to have something to say.
I reviewed Ann Tyler, but I feel in the 500 words that I used to review that one Ann Tyler book 3 years ago, I've sort of said my piece on Ann Tyler. Because otherwise it's just, here's the new one, it's kind of like the other ones. If you like those, you'll like this one. But if I had some point about her writing, I already said it.
Right.
And I don't have another point about her.
So could that really be a kind of backhanded, almost insulting assessment of the industry? What you're saying really that there are a large number of successful authors who basically have a shtick and don't vary from it, so there's no reason to review them?
I'm not precluding the possibility that somebody else might have an interesting take on Ann Tyler. And maybe I would too. What this question for me is, I would say the answer to this question takes up almost half of my job. It's not the reading and the writing. It's trying to figure out.
It's the picking.
It's the picking, and you have and so that occupies a huge amount of my deciding, and it comes down to pub date. Your reviews need to be pegged to publication date, so they need
and some weeks are thinner than others.
Yeah, and some weeks are different. Exactly. Some weeks they're full of stuff, and some weeks you're not quite. You don't quite know how to fill it out, so you might take a flyer on something that you wouldn't have otherwise. I'm not going to have read the whole book before deciding, but I might have read 50 pages. I'll try to do that as much as possible, or just one chapter.
Yeah, you call it reading into a book.
Reading into a book.
That'll let you know, right? Usually there'll be I always describe it as a charge of electricity. You'll know right away if is the book there or is it not. Is it just a pile of pages or is the author showing up? If the author's showing up, you always want to write about it. I don't imagine you can.
Right. And then as you discuss when you're thinking about what nonfiction, that has a lot to do with the subject.
Right.
And you can also think about that in terms of the novel. What is it? What is it about? Do I have any? Am I interested in that subject?
Right.
Regardless of the quality of
with nonfiction mainstream releases, sometimes a lot of choices removed. If there's a big new biography of the Emperor Justinian and there hasn't been one in 40 years, you're not going to care so much whether or not it jumps with electricity. You're going to want to do it. You're probably going to want to do it anyway. But with novels, well, I don't envy you.
But I would say, you are just trying to get back to that essential point is, do you have anything interesting to say about this? Because that is the point of the review. The point is not to, in the course of the review, you evaluate the book, but that is not that's not all you're trying to do.
And you don't want, when you're asking that question, do I have anything new to say about the book? You don't want to be so desirous of the spotlight that you start saying things about the book that aren't there.
No.
You don't want to find Jamesian nuance in Sally Rooney. You don't want to do that no matter how good a writer you are.
It's possible Steve read a magazine article that displeased him recently.
You don't want to do that. You don't want to look at the book and say, well, I don't have anything to say about this because a whiff of stupidity was perfectly done. That has been said many, many times before. But what if I did have something to say about it? What if I came up with something? What if I had a take? The last thing a critic wants is a take.
No, not a take.
Oh, my God. The last thing you want.
Prefer the word angle.
All right. Question number 3. What are the different approaches you take when you review fiction versus nonfiction? You occasionally do nonfiction.
Yeah, sometimes.
If a Cape Cod book trundles down the line, you can't let the Cape go unrepresented.
Exactly.
It's not often, but you do.
Well, you're in a much better position to answer this than I am. To some extent,
they're not going to like my answer. 99% of all contemporary fiction is garbage. You're not going to like that answer either now that I think about it, because that's your job. But most of it is just so awful.
Maybe it's the same as that it's a negotiation between talking about the subject and then talking about the execution of that subject.
Yeah.
You're just going back and forth between those two things. And maybe when it's nonfiction, well, I don't know, maybe that's not true. You tell me. Most of the reviews you read, like if there's a piece on a nonfiction book in the New Yorker, 95% of it is just going to be the author just talking about the subject.
Right.
And then they'll say, in this compelling
or readable.
In this readable chronicle by
or
so-and-so.
If we want to get Ron Charles's go liminal, he can't stand that. But Ron is a perfect example. He says all the time, he satirically calls himself a summarizer of the plots of literary novels. Because no matter what it is, fiction or nonfiction, you have to tell the reader what it is you're talking about.
Right.
You can't just assume that they'll know. And that is true for the latest piece of crap from some popular TikTok fiction writer as it is for the attack on Pearl Harbor. Some space has to be devoted. That's why I like to keep myself to a nice newspaper length. Because if you do the New York Review of Books, it's going to tempt you to just tell the story.
Right.
And ignore the book.
Right.
Whereas if you only got a limited amount of space, then you're not going to do that.
And sometimes a reviewer is an expert in that subject, but sometimes you're like, they know all this stuff because they read the book, but they're not. They're just sort of pretending like they knew it all, and then they're sort of giving the book one.
You can always tell. Credit. You can always tell when they are quoting a third party source.
Right.
all you have to do is just look, is that quote in the book? If that quote is in the book under review, then they didn't know anything about this before they did it. Whereas the other end of the spectrum, you'll get the catty ones who go all the way to the end of the review and then say, they'll tell some fascinating anecdote about, Charles de Gaulle or Joan of Arc and whatever, and then they'll say, oddly, so-and-so did not include this story in their review. And it's just, oh. Then you know that not only did they know the subject, but they know it a little too well. They maybe shouldn't have taken the review. So the answer, would you say the answer then is largely the same?
I think it is.
You have to orient the reader.
Yes.
Once you've done that, you're off to the races. So let's see, question number 4. How different is it to write about just one book versus several books at once? Oh my God, you're the king of the roundup. If you are writing in the latter, do you always draw out similar themes between the books to make direct comparisons?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the piece. Sometimes there's a piece in which the point is a bunch of books are grouped together in order to pull out some sort of theme, in which case, yes, you draw direct comparisons and contrasts, and that is the whole point of a piece on Jamesy and Sally Rooney and whoever.
But not you. Not the fiction chronicle.
You don't have to.
There, you don't. Are you tempted to draw artificial connections between the books? Or?
I do it all the time. I do it because I think I don't. So there's no injunction to do it in the column that I write. But often I will do it. Often I will try to pick books where I think that there might be some sort of connection or some sort of thread or through line. Sometimes just something occurs to me as I read it, or I see an echo, which I think can make for an interesting column, and I think can also, we're talking about you want an angle on the book. Sometimes it gives you a slightly artificial angle, potentially, because you've gone from one book and your angle is the connection with that other book, which is sort of contrived, but I don't know. I think you can, as long as you don't push too hard on it, you can use it at least as a transitional thing. Sometimes you can draw bigger conclusions from it.
Yeah, the thing we're talking about here is a roundup review, where it's a number of books being reviewed in the same piece.
Right.
Book section editors always want to do roundup reviews because they're always desperate for space. They realize how many books there are. They want to review more books than they have the space for, so they can find a reviewer who can do 3 books on World War II that they happen to come out at the same time. Wonderful. As far as I'm concerned, the main responsibility there, you always do it, but a lot of people don't, is that you've got to do justice to each book. They're only getting a third of the space that they would get if the review were all their own, but you've still got to do justice to them. They're still fighting for their life in that little litter there. You don't want to just ignore them. Like, once again, the New York Review of Books, who will do those huge articles saying books consulted in this piece. They're barely mentioned at all. It's just the author going on and on about, the Ardennes, the Ardennes forest or something like that. In my opinion, the key responsibility is that you've got to do each book justice. Because it's unfair. Doesn't your heart always sink when you see 2 books on virtually the same subject come out at the same time? You know the authors didn't plan that.
Yeah.
And you know now they're looking at that and saying, oh my God, so I'm going to be grouped with this book.
Right.
Anywhere that I get reviewed.
Right.
Because if you have 2 books come out at the same time about Constantinople, there's no chance, there's no book editor anywhere in the world who will assign separate reviews to those 2 books. If they want to review one of them, they'll tell the reviewer, hey, could you look at both of these? Tell me if you can make a 2-book review, we'll fly, but otherwise we'll just drop it. We're not going to do one for each.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing to keep in mind when you're reading reviews like that, I've talked about, you have an angle, but if there's an angle of approach to discuss a book, that suggests that there can be numerous angles, and in fact there can. You can approach a book from lots and lots of different ways. Like you say, you're still responsible for giving a full picture of its strengths and weaknesses, but what you focus on, whatever that angle is still going to be a slightly specific way to focus on the book. And if you're doing sort of a contrast piece or a comparison piece, that angle you're going to have to choose an angle that has to do with both of them. So it's not necessarily going to give the full picture. And just when you're reading a piece like that, you need to keep in mind that a person could take a different angle.
Right. There's massaging going on.
Yes.
Just keep in mind the reviewer.
Yes. They're doing a certain amount of generalizing in order to make a point that's sort of broader than the book.
I did a roundup review for the Christian Science Monitor with 8 U.S. president books.
Right.
I stacked them all in our little book room, in the book room at the Monitor. I stacked them all. I brought my editor back there and said, I'd like to do all of these in one piece. And she said, oh, surely you can't review 8 books in one piece. And I said, challenge accepted. And she went, oh.
And I'm sure you gave yourself a framework where you had an opening paragraph saying there are 2 kinds of presidential biographies.
I think I did something like that.
There's the grand sweeping one, or there's the minute one that focuses on one aspect or something. And then you framed every single book within that dichotomy or something. You created some
That's
sort
really
of
good.
approach. Yeah.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
I should write 10 reviews like that,
Right.
or maybe 1,000. Hey, if it works, if it ain't broke,
Yeah.
if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm caught between Sam and Hannah, and I'm saying let's just move on before we get to Borscht Belt and rollicking. Let's just move on. Question number 5: how often do you write negative book reviews? Do editors ever balk at publishing?
No, they don't balk at publishing them. I mean, I've never heard of that in serious publishing quarters. Editors balking at publishing. Although
What would
it
happen,
must
though,
happen.
theoretically, for a fiction chronicle? What would happen if you chose 3 books specifically to tear them apart? So a 3-way hatchet job. Would your editor say, no, we're not going to run this?
I know. I think they would like it. I mean,
That's rare. That's very rare. Most book section editors don't want hatchet jobs. Their phrase is, let's bury it in silence. Let's bury the bad books. We have so little space.
Right.
We can't justify using it for books that aren't good.
Right. I guess I could see that an editor would run it but not love it, and then you would have a reputation with that editor of being someone who is potentially trouble because you were always going to possibly give them the sort
if you're a normal freelancer without a berth, you don't want you'll be worried about starting a negative reputation, so you'll start pulling your punches.
Right.
It's a what do they call it? A vicious circle.
It is true. I mean, you watching, if you read book reviews, I wonder if when you read a reviewer, do you have in mind, oh, this person writes negative reviews or this person doesn't? I think people get reputations as someone who will write a pan, someone who will write a hatchet job.
I think
it shouldn't be that way. It should, whatever you read, if you like it or hate it, you should just say that you should approach the review in that spirit. But I think there are some people who are just sort of known as people who will write pans, and so that becomes part of their reputation in some way. And some people who just never ever will.
No, I see fewer and fewer pans.
Yeah, maybe.
Just fewer and fewer. I've talked to a number of editors who said that, a variation on that same thing. We've got so little space. Why spend it? Why waste it on a book that we're not praising? And I never wanted to cross an editor, but the obvious answer to that is that the purpose of the section is not to praise books. Your question is based on the assumption that the purpose of our section is to praise books. And that's not true. If it is, well, that's really bad. That's really bad on its own. I'm rather fond of a negative review.
You don't say.
From time to time. Let's see here. Question number 6. What are the to get back to negative reviews, though, you say you pick a bunch of books, you read into them, you're completely open-minded, you're wondering what's going to go on here, what's going to snag me and make me think, oh, I do have something to say about you. Does it ever happen that you'll have maybe brought a bunch of those books home and you're reading into one of them and you know that something real is going on, but you're not quite sure, and then the more you read, the more you think, the angrier you get, the more you think, I do want to review this, but I want to rip it a new one.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Sure. That's an interesting sort of negative review. I mean, what you don't want in a negative review, I think, is when you're just sort of complaining. You're just sort of like, another one of these sorts of books.
I have to think the kind that I just described is the kind of negative review an author might like. They might like to know that they inspired that.
Exactly. I think there's something to that. I mean, sometimes people write negative reviews in in mean ways, but if the negative review is you have a fundamental disagreement with something, with some aspect of the book, with some thinking that went behind it, or something that the book is asserting through overtly or structurally or something, if there's something you just disagree with, you say books are not supposed to be like this, or this book is just wrong in the way it's structured, and I'm going to argue with it, you are showing a respect to the author by
I
doing
think so.
that, by arguing.
Not
with
all
them.
authors see that.
No.
But I think so. It's like the age-old saying that the worst thing in the world is apathy.
Right.
The worst thing in the world is for a critic to say, "Yeah, it's okay. I suppose it's okay."
Right. When you want to be really, really damning, you say, you know, we've seen this 1,000 times before. This one doesn't do anything different than the other ones, and
that is the kind of review that I could almost justify an editor saying, "No, I don't want this."
Yes.
I don't agree with editors who don't want negative reviews, but a review that says this checks the boxes and then leaves politely at 5, why would you waste time on that? That's a book report. But anyway, now I could stick on negative reviews forever. I won't do it though. Let's see here. Question number 6. What are the advantages and disadvantages of having a single place where you review regularly versus being a freelance reviewer?
Well, there's only advantages to having a single place where you review regularly. There's no advantages to not having that.
No,
that's what
there are no advantages to not having that. That's what drives freelancers to drink.
Yeah,
so they don't have that.
That's what you want. You want to have if you can get any sort of regular berth, any sort of connection with an editor who wants your stuff at any sort of regular basis.
Yeah, a berth is golden.
That's what you want.
I don't know that you can live as a freelancer now without that. Once upon a time, before rents exploded, you could, but now I don't think you could.
I don't know.
You'd have to have work lined up all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
Because, except in some people's cases, editors die, editors move on, journals change their approach to things. It's the normal life of a freelancer. You're lucky if a berth lasts you a long time. And you don't want to push it either, right? Because the more you always like to think that the berth is relying on you as much as you're relying on it, but that is never true.
Yeah,
it's never true.
You can't make yourself annoying.
No,
yeah,
no. Not if you've steadily piled more eggs in that basket. Then you really can't, unless you're just blessed with a succession of really great editors.
Right.
This is the thing that I always like to point out to people is that when you read like a collection of book reviews, like we've got a wall of collection of book reviews looking at both of us, all of our dead comrades. Mm-hmm. Not Ron Charles. He's not dead yet, is he?
No, not at all.
He's in the vim and vigor of health. But when you look at those collections, you want to remember, a lot of the critics involved will remind you that their work in its original form was overseen by an editor who would say, don't take that chance. Don't use that phrase. Don't go out on that limb. That's why a lot of them, when it comes time to make that book, they go straight back to their originals and publish the stuff that they always wanted to do. So it's kind of rare that an editor will give you a regular berth and a completely free hand. That's kind of rare. You mostly get that, don't you? I would imagine that your pieces are not vitiated at all.
I hope not. I mean, they're edited for sure. We go through stuff.
Look at that. There was a siren and it stopped before it got here because they know you're here. They just
Good.
blare right over me. But, let's see here. And then question number 7, there's a block of stuff after this. I don't know what that is. We'll get to it.
Okay.
Question number 7 is, if you couldn't review books anymore, would you choose to be a theater critic, a music reviewer, an art critic, or a restaurant reviewer?
Oh my God.
The option that I would give for you is not listed here, and that's a travel critic.
Yeah.
You would love that. I bet you'd be you've done a little of it a long time ago.
Yeah, travel
You'd be
writing
great
is
at it.
the only genre I was really interested in doing. Yeah, I mean, among those, I guess theater, but I would have trouble. I don't. What's the deal with restaurant critics?
I don't know.
Why are they so beloved?
I don't know.
Every month, not only are people talking about a restaurant review, but there's like a profile of a restaurant critic.
Yeah. Can you imagine me as a restaurant critic? Why isn't there more food? My review is I would be judging places solely by poundage. But movie critic is not listed here either. I guess for me it would also be a theater critic.
Yeah.
Just because theater critics is one of the only isolated niche review genres left where complete cattiness, it doesn't raise any eyebrows. Where it's expected that you will be savage. Not everybody is. Not every theater critic is. But oh my God, the ones that are, I would love that. To just go and bloodlet 2 times a week. That would be awesome. Absolutely awesome. Although you're at the mercy of the shows then.
Yeah.
Movie critics didn't have to miss a beat during COVID.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
But books aren't going anywhere.
Apparently not.
I hope not. If COVID didn't kill them. But then okay. Section B here is either or. Rapid fire either or.
Oh my God.
Which is kind of, I didn't notice this when I copied this over. That's kind of weird because that's not how you think. And it's also not how Hannah thinks. Hannah and Sam both think in essay questions. So a rapid fire either or, I'm not, well, we'll see. We'll see what this is like. Number one, Henry James or James Baldwin? See? You can hear it. You can hear the 8,000 word think piece for the London Review of Books. That's exactly how he thinks. He thinks in those pieces, and so does Hannah. So are these all for me? I don't know.
But why those two? What do they have to do with each other?
There's no way you're going to be able to get through this whole list. Just say James Baldwin and we'll move on.
James Baldwin.
Right. Oh my God, this is going to be a nightmare. All right, not the next one though, because the next one only has one author that you recognize.
Okay.
Edgar Allan Poe or Edgar Rice Burroughs?
I will say Poe.
Number 3, the Pauls, Auster, Harding, Lynch, or Murray?
Jesus.
Are you a fan of Paul Auster?
Not really.
Me neither. What is the thing about him? I've never got it. I don't hate him, but I've never seen...
Yeah, Paul Auster. You gotta... I don't know. It's a real... You gotta be into semiotics.
Something. I'm still going to say Paul Auster because I hate the other 3. But
Oh, you like Paul Murray. Say Murray.
A bit. Question number, or no, rapid fire. It's not a question. It's
Rapid
not
fire.
essays. He's still thinking about the first one.
Yeah.
So, number 4, C.S. Lewis or Lewis Carroll?
I don't know.
Why would Hannah do this? It must be her revenge on another deep thinker. That's the only thing. That's the only reason I can think of.
Oh God. But it's a bizarre.
Flummoxing you here.
It's just because they have the word Lewis in it?
I believe so, yes.
C.S. Lewis.
All right, okay. Number 5, Stephen King or Barbara King Solver? You're not a big fan of either one,
No.
are you? Neither am I.
No.
All right, we'll try
Pass.
something else. Number 6, Ted Hughes or Langston Hughes?
Well, Langston Hughes.
I say this Ted Hughes here. This will be a little bit contrarian. Number 7, James Joyce or Joyce Carol Oates?
I'll go with James Joyce.
All right. Number 8, Leopold Bloom or Harold Bloom?
Hannah.
I know. Sooner or later,
One
the
of
two
these
you are
people is real, Mike.
Sooner or later, the two of you are going to be here at High Cottage at the same time, and then he's going to have a bone to pick with you. I'm going to say Harold Bloom, of course, here.
Sure.
Then number 9, Edward P. Jones or Edward Said?
I haven't really read Edward Said, so Edward
Yeah?
P. Jones.
Did you read Orientalism?
No, I
No?
mean, I've read about it,
Oh, wow.
but I haven't
Okay.
read it
Uh,
myself.
Number 10, Joan Didion or Joan Acocella?
I'll say Joan Acocella.
Me too.
I like her.
You're supposed to like the older
Late lamented.
author better, but she's wonderful.
Yeah.
She's wonderful in a better way, I think. Number 11, Jack or Jill, Kerouac or Lepore?
Jill Lepore.
Me too. Not a fan of Jack Kerouac at all. I love Jill Lepore. And that's not just because of the Taft piece in the New Yorker. I love these truths. I thought it was incredible. Where are we here? 12, Jacques Lacan or Jack London?
London.
Me too. Number 13, Northrop Frye or Stephen Fry? Have you read either?
I have read Stephen Fry's Moab is My Washpot, which is great. But I guess I have to say Northrop Frye.
I've read I think everything by either one of them. And Northrop Frye is a loon, but I like him better. Absolutely like him better. And then we're at the end here.
Oh, no.
The end could put you in trouble, not only with Hannah, but with me and Frida.
Uh-oh.
Emma Donahue or Steve Donahue?
Oh.
I don't even know which of these I'd pick. Oh, man.
Can only be one Donahue for
There
me.
can only be one. I've been told that in person, at conventions and literary conferences, she has something of a Borscht Belt sense of humor.
Is that right?
And really plows down the food. I don't think there's a diplomatic way you can answer this.
I imagine she's covered in dog hair at all times, too.
What about you all?
Yeah.
Emma Donahue or Steve Donahue?
List your answers in the replies.
That is it. I don't even know what to call this. What is it called? Conversing with Critics. Hannah gave it a title. So there you go. That's your requisite booktube event here.
Okay.
So we're going to get back to eating and a little drinking. Well, one of us will do a little drinking. One of us will not do a little drinking. And the bean, of course, and book talk. So I will wrap this up for now, and we'll see you all later. Thank you all, and thank you, Hannah, for the questions. That was wonderful.